Day 2 of the Real Estate Investor Series. Today we're talking about active and passive losses. One of the reasons that real estate investing is so attractive is because you're investing into an asset that appreciates in value while also getting that huge upfront cost and thus leading to tax losses at the end of the year. But one major thing to understand here is that active losses can only offset active income, passive losses can only offset passive income. And by default, real estate investing activity is passive. So if you have a ton of passive income, then you can use those passive losses to offset that passive income. But the problem that we see a lot is that people are trying to use passive income from rentals to offset their active income from their W-2 job or their small business. So then the problem becomes, how do I make sure that my losses from my rental activity are designated as active rather than passive? So if you do actively participate in your rental, this is an IRS term, active participation, which means that you set rents, you pick tenants. This means that you're eligible for a $25,000 active participation allowance, but this starts phasing out really early from $100,000 to $150,000 of modified AGI. So if you're relatively a high income earner, then you could be totally phased out of this $25,000 allowance. And a way to completely avoid this phase out is to have real estate professional status. This doesn't mean necessarily just calling yourself a real estate professional, but more than 50% of the work that you do has to be in real estate activities. You have to spend more than 750 hours in the year doing these real estate activities. And typically, if you have a full-time job already not related to any real estate activity, then it's really hard to prove to the IRS that you are a real estate professional and spend that amount of time. There have already been a lot of court cases around this, and they deny it every single time if you have a full-time job not related to real estate. But the key thing to remember here is that if you're married or filed jointly, your spouse's hours worked also apply to you. Very common setup that we see, high income earning person and their spouse becomes a real estate professional and does all the real estate professional activities. So then those losses from the real estate activity are recharacterized as non-passive or active losses that can then offset all of your active income. Another caveat to this are short-term rentals. Sometimes you hear about short-term rental loophole. I don't really think it's a loophole, it's just basic tax law. But if you have a short-term rental, which means average stay 7 days or less, think like an Airbnb type of rental, then the material participation requirements come a little bit easier to meet. The rules for just material participation are a little bit different. So you have to spend at least 500 hours in the activity, or your participation personally is substantially all the participation, or your participation is 100 plus hours and nobody else participates more than you. So for example, if you have a property manager, you have to make sure that you're spending more hours working on the property than the property manager. And as with anything related to tax, documentation is key. I know I spit out a bunch of numbers and hours and things like that, but you need to be keeping logs about how much time you're spending in these activities and who else is participating in these activities. Because again, the burden of proof is always on you. The IRS doesn't have to prove